Welcome to the Wicked Book Nook. We are going to start my vampire system, starting with episode 1, and then we will progress after each episode and give you a small summary of my thoughts. Thank you, and enjoy. Welcome to the...
Episode 1. Just an Old Book. "Try not to die by tripping over yourself, Quinn," a boy shouted down the hallway, laughing uncontrollably right after. Quinn dismissed the petty mockery as he carried on walking down the school corridor. The harassment had become a daily occurrence for him, but it still bothered him just as much as it did every other day. Thus, he wasn't able to hold back his desire to retaliate. Quinn slowed down his stride and stopped. He pushed his glasses back up onto the ridge of his nose as they had slipped down from his face. Just from looking at the glasses, it was clear that he needed a new pair. One could tell that they were heavily worn. The glasses looked crooked as he wore them, and even the temples had tape covering them. He then turned around and immediately raised his middle finger, responding to the slander. "I bet you don't even know how many fingers I'm holding up." Upon hearing the taunt, the boy clenched his fist and started running towards Quinn. "You level 1 piece of crap! When are you going to learn that you don't belong in this world?" The boy placed both of his hands together, and a green ball of light started to form between them. When he was only a few meters away from Quinn, the boy threw his hands forward, and a green beam shot out from the palm of his hands. Quinn had nowhere to go, and the ray of light was too fast for him to dodge. Hence, he knew that all he could do was grit his teeth and bear the pain. As the light hit him, his body was lifted into the air and sent flying backward onto the far-end corridor wall. "What's going on?" a student among the crowd said. "Are they fighting on the last day of school?" A crowd had immediately formed outside, interested in what the commotion was all about. One of the female students ran over to the wall's damaged part to check on the assaulted student's safety. As the dust started to settle down, Quinn's slightly curly black hair slowly came into view. When the smoke eventually cleared up, the female student finally saw who it was. She instantly backed away and continued on with her business as if nothing happened. The moment that the female student had returned to her friends, he could see that they were laughing at her. "I can't believe you tried to help him." "I didn't see who it was," the girl retorted, her cheeks flushed. After that, Quinn stood up and lifted his glasses that were thrown onto the floor. To his dismay, one of the hinges had fallen off once again. Instead of wearing the worn-out pair, he let it hang on his hand. Damn it, not again. It was the last day of school for Quinn, so he hoped that someone wouldn't try anything with him. He was sick and tired of their doings, but he wasn't the type to ignore those either. He had seen people who had chosen to keep their heads down and tolerate the harassment. However, their treatment was far worse than what he received. He didn't bother to stay at school like the rest of the students. He picked up his broken glasses and proceeded to leave school. As he walked past, he saw the students having conversations among themselves in their circles. Some were laughing, while some had tears, thinking it was the last time they would ever see each other again. However, Quinn wasn't a part of any of that, and he didn't want to be. Cliques would not welcome him anyway. He was the weird one. When he finally arrived home, he immediately went to work. Living in a single-bedroom apartment with just enough space to fit a single bed and desk was enough for him. A TV was mounted on the wall, but Quinn would merely use it as a background noise source and didn't watch anything. The apartment was provided to him by the government, since he had no living relatives and was only 16 years of age. On top of his bed was a single suitcase that contained all of his belongings that were neatly packed. He walked towards a cabinet, immediately pulling a drawer open which accommodated a single book. It was a large and thick hardbound book, weighing about half a kilo. The front cover of the book was in a color that mimicked a lighter shade of blood. In the center, the lonesome fronts of an upper and lower jawbone could be seen, both colored in the swampy shade of brown. The upper jaw sort of had 4 separated fangs. Meanwhile, the lower one had 2 sharp teeth on the 2 far ends on the overhead and 5 evenly spaced underneath. "Let's try again today," Quinn said as he lifted the book and placed it on top of the desk. He then quickly went to his bag to pull out a little test tube that was half filled with a colorless liquid. "Test 112, hydrochloric acid," Let's see how it goes? He then started to slowly pour the liquid out of the test tube onto the book. So far, there is no reaction. He proceeded to continue to pour all of the test tube contents on the book, but there was no reaction at the end of his experiment. Carefully, he examined the book while jotting down the results in his notebook, seeing if there was any damage done, yet the book looked the same as always. Another failure. Why won't you open? Why did Mom and Dad even have this thing? 112 times. This was the number of different ways that Quinn had tried to open the book. Not only did the book not open, but it seemed like it cannot be damaged either. He had even tried burning the book, cutting the book, melting the book, though nothing had worked against the book that seemed utterly durable. Lying on his bed, he turned on the TV for its sole purpose, making background noises. He never really paid attention to what was on. With it, the sound of other voices made him feel less lonely. Upon turning on, the TV displayed an ongoing news show. The peace treaty with the Dalki race has lasted for 5 years now, but officials are saying that tension is rising once again. Now we must prepare for another war. The mention of war had always been shown on the TV non-stop ever since a certain day 30 years ago. The human race received a visit from the so-called Dalki. They had the physique of humans, except for their skins that were riddled with scales and the presence of tails that were similar to what the dragons had. With no real clue of why they had suddenly appeared, they immediately demanded that the human race hand over their resources and wanted to use them as slaves. Of course, the humans decided to fight back, but they quickly found out that their modern technology was useless against them. Bullets couldn't penetrate their skin, and as for tanks, well, Dalki had airships. Every individual, disregarding the gender, was told to fight for their planet, and that included Quinn's parents. The war went on for years, so he grew up not knowing what his parents looked like. When the humans were on the brink of defeat, a select group of people came forward. These people had special abilities. They began sharing their knowledge of how they obtained such power in hopes of turning the tide in the war, and thankfully, it worked. Even so, the Dalki were still strong, and a seemingly endless stalemate led to the peace treaty signed 5 years ago. Obviously enough, human greed got the better of humanity, and instead of sharing these powers with everybody else, the higher-ranked governmental officials decided to keep them for themselves. Only those with money could learn the more powerful abilities, while everyone else was left with scraps. It was something that needed to be done. Poverty had taken over the world, but people had powers and were using them uncontrollably, unlike before. Quinn was given nothing when his parents died. The government agreed to pay for his living expenses while he was still in school, but that was it. When his parents died, him being at the age of 10, an agent appeared at his doorstep and handed him a book. He was told that it was the only thing that his parents possessed, one that they passed down when they died. "Why is the world so unfair?" he uttered, lamenting about his situation. Getting out of his bed, he started sauntering towards his desk. He picked up his glasses that were still slightly broken and decided that he needed to fix them. He noticed that one of the lenses was slightly out of place, and he tried to punch it back into its frame. "Come on, just get in!" he shouted as he tried to forcefully fix the glasses. The frustration he had been bottling up was on his face as he struggled furiously with the lens. Unfortunately, the lens suddenly crumbled into pieces. One of the shards of plastic even created a deep gash in his thumb. He screamed and kicked at the table. "Why does the world hate me?" After a while, he calmed down and started to clean up the little pieces of glass, noticing that a piece had landed on top of his book. As Quinn removed the piece of glass, a drop of blood from his thumb landed on top of the book. The object plastered on the center of the book started to glow, and suddenly the book began to float, hovering until it was on eye level with Quinn. Quinn darted back and away from it. The glow from the book made his room look emptier with the little bed at the corner and the solitary seat beside it. What the hell is happening? The book started to emit a blinding radiance as it shook uncontrollably. A few seconds later, it finally opened up. Pages after pages were being turned. Quinn couldn't take his eyes off of the shining book. It was as if he was in a deep trance. The words written on the pages of the book weren't in any language that he had ever seen before. Nevertheless, for some reason, he felt like he could understand it. When the book reached its last page, it started to disappear, gradually turning into dust. At the same time, his body suddenly felt weak. Quinn's vision was starting to fade, and with that, his eyes pulled shut. But just before he passed out, there was a single message that he heard. "Congratulations, you have been granted the Unable to maintain consciousness long enough to hear the final words, Quinn duly passed out. Episode 2.
Well, that seems like a good start to a hero style, I guess. Bullied in school, dead parents, orphan boy. Let's see where it goes.
Daily Quest. Gradually, Quinn's eyelids started to flutter open, and his vision soon returned. His head felt heavy, and his body was slightly sore. As he lifted himself off of the ground, he touched his head gently to see if he had injured himself. "Why does my head hurt so much?" he thought, bewildered and unable to make any sense of what just happened to him. After patting his head all over, Quinn then went to pick up his glasses that had fallen on the floor not too far from him. Regrettably, only one lens that was left intact. Still, Quinn put the glasses on out of habit. He felt a little disoriented and his vision became slightly blurry. He took them back off and noticed that his vision only turned hazy when he put the glasses on. "Wow," he thought, before he quickly rushed to his desk to grab a pencil. He proceeded to draw the letter A on the wall and stepped back. He continued to move back until his back had hit the wall that was on the other side of the room. The figure A was still there, and he could see it clearly. "What? But how?" Quinn said slowly, mind blown. He was still trying to make sense of what had happened to him. Somehow, Quinn's vision was now perfect. He had lived his whole life with terrible eyesight, but strangely, he could now see clearly. His mind started flashing images of the events that led to his passing on the ground. The more the memories flooded his mind, the more one thing stood out: the book. When Quinn surveyed the room, he felt panic building up in him. The book was missing. The book! Where the hell's the book? He looked everywhere for the book, yet he couldn't find it. It couldn't have gone missing in such a small room, so its disappearance was baffling. "Where's the damn book?" he lamented. He imagined the book at one corner of the room, hidden and out of sight, somehow living and silently enjoying his misery. "Maybe it's like my socks. They go missing all the time." Don't be stupid. This is a book we're talking about, not a sock," he muttered, trying to reason the uncanny comparison. Quinn tried to think hard about what had occurred a few moments before he collapsed. He took his mind back, moment by moment. Then he suddenly remembered the book hovering in the air. Then, just before closing his eyes, he heard a few words. What was it, he thought? A type of system message? As soon as Quinn said those words, a status screen appeared right before his eyes. User, Quinn Talon. Race, human. Level, 1. 0 of 100 experience. HP, 10 of 10. Strength, 10. Agility, 10. Stamina, 10. Whoa, Quinn said. It was like the old games people used to play all the time when the Earth was not in danger of being overrun by some alien creatures. Quinn noticed that, on the status screen, there were more tabs that were placed on the top. Accordingly, even without doing anything and just by reading the tabs in his head, the screen automatically switched to the Skills tab. Skills. 0 skill points available. Skill locked. Skill locked. It was strange, but he played along, curiosity fueling him. His life was normally characterized by boredom, as he had no friends and was the loneliest child in the school. On the Skills tab, Quinn wasn't really able to see much. Everything seemed to be locked and slightly grayed out, so he quickly moved on to the next tab, Shop. Unlocks at level 10. Can I do anything? He wondered. The last tab was the Quest tab. Finally, it seemed like a tab that wasn't locked behind a requirement. Main Quest. Reach level 10. Daily Quest. Drink 2 liters of water. Reward. 5 EXP. After checking everything that the system had to offer, Quinn had to just think about closing the system, and it did. When he thought about opening it again, the screen immediately popped up in front of him. There was another thought on Quinn's mind that explained what was happening to him. The book that his parents had left him was an ability book. These books could often be bought at very high prices from the military or a company. Some were even sold on the marketplace. He had never seen any of such books, but only heard of them in whispers of fellow students that would have nothing to do with him. However, Quinn had never heard of an ability book that promptly disappeared, granting the user a system such as the one he currently had. The ability books were designed to be learnt manually. It wasn't something that one could pick up and instantly understand how to use, and it definitely did not appear as a screen overhead when one thought of it. A smile started to slowly appear on Quinn's face. This was great news for him. He had always been a level 1 ability user because he could never afford to buy any ability books. To his fortune, he had something that he could use. His mind raced, reeling out options for him. He had things he could practice, things he had never done before. The book would help him, he thought. "Waterbending, come on," Quinn said as he raised his right palm forward towards the kitchen sink, expecting water to gush from the tap at his command. Embarrassingly, nothing happened. "Okay, next. Wind, out." Quinn did the same again, but there was nothing happening. After trying out many different things according to all the abilities that he had seen before, it turned out that he was unable to perform any of them. He made his way to his bed and sat dejectedly on it. What the hell is this useless thing? Is it really just a system ability? Quinn thought about it for a while. If it truly was like a game, then perhaps, by completing the quests, he would eventually get stronger and unlock more skills. He had heard the students in school gush over those memories, which were shared to them by their parents. Some of them still had these games, which were now antiques, sitting in their homes. Maybe it was his mistake that he was treating it like an ordinary ability book when clearly it was not. He was still unable to find it, and ability books did not disappear into thin air. Usually, ability books were based around one ability. It was important for a person to select their first ability book carefully, since a regular human body could only perform one ability attribute in their lifetime. If one got transformability as their first ability, they would only be able to acquire other skills that were related to this attribute. For instance, if someone obtained fire as their attribute, they could solely dedicate themselves into gathering skills that the attribute fire could utilize. But this book was different, he felt it. What ability book could completely heal his eye defect? Quinn went to open his mini-fridge, grabbing the bottles of water that were inside. He soon began downing the water bottles one by one. Damn, how much is 2 liters? My belly feels like it's going to burst. After finishing his 4th bottle of water, the screen popped up in front of him, and a new notification message appeared. Daily quest complete. 5 EXP has been granted. 5 of 100. Well, at least I know how the system works now, Quinn said, satisfaction evident in his tone. A loud knock from the door startled Quinn. He jerked and almost threw the empty bottle of water he was holding on the ground. The knock came again. There was only one group that knocked like that, the real soldiers. Quinn dashed towards the door and opened it. As he opened the passageway, standing in front of him was a large, muscular, bald-headed man wearing a black military uniform, signifying the Earth attribute. There were several medals on his garment. His name was written on the area of the uniform right above his chest. Sergeant Griff. "Boy, it is time for you to vacate your room immediately. The vehicle has been waiting outside for 5 minutes already." With everything that had happened, Quinn had forgotten about his move today. "It's time for you to head to military school," Griff announced.
Earth, fire, wind, water, heart. When your powers combine, I am Captain Planet. And here's some eyesight back with a letter A. Military by Quinn.